What's up, guys? This is Gage. Welcome back to my channel where I share my journey as a Generation Z kid discovering my parents' Gen X music and entertainment. Recently, my dad and I watched the movie Dazed and Confused. While I thought it was a great movie, what really blew me away was the music. So many great songs. So I started thinking, was the 70s the best guitar decade? After a lot of searching and listening, I put together a list of my 20 favorite riffs from the decade. A couple of notes before we get started. I only used one riff per artist, or this could easily have turned into the best of Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath. Also, with so many great songs, I put these in chronological order. And I also picked my favorite riffs, and not always the most famous or popular riff by a band. So on that note, let's start another episode of Generation Gage. Released in 1970, this iconic riff comes from a band that many believe to be the fathers of heavy metal. Also released in 1970, this next riff was written by not one, but two of the greatest guitarists of their generation. It also won a Grammy 2 decades after it was originally released. This next riff comes from a song that helped this band secure a spot at the 1970 Isle of Wight Festival, where they played to over 600,000 people. This next song was the opening track from arguably this band's greatest album, and was named as one of Rolling Stone's 500 greatest songs of all time. This next song was recorded by one of my favorite guitar players, before he went on to join one of the greatest selling artists of all time. This next riff comes from a song that was a hit in 1973, but was a remix 20 years later and hit number 7 in the UK. The next riff was played by a guitarist that Jimi Hendrix claimed was his favorite player of all time. Next on this list is one of the most recognizable riffs of all time, and was written in response to Neil Young's song, Southern Man. This next riff comes from a track that is described as this artist's farewell to the glam rock era he helped start. This next riff comes from a supergroup whose singer has already been on this list. This next riff was on the opening credits of Dazed and Confused, and might be a controversial choice for this band. Another song used on the Dazed and Confused soundtrack. This was the only song to be used more than once in the movie. This next riff started out as a finger warm-up exercise for this guitarist, until his bandmates heard him playing it at rehearsals. This next riff comes from a song that almost didn't happen. The guitarist only suggested it to the band after they were in the studio and was the last song to make the album. This next riff comes from a band that was one of the founders of the Seattle rock scene. This next song clocks in at 1 minute and 56 seconds and is all riff. Punk didn't mess around. This riff was played by one of the greatest session players of all time, and this song was a big hit for his own band. This next riff was picked out by the band's singer during a jam session, and at the time the guitarist said, "It's just another riff." This This next riff was originally supposed to be a part of a different song, but got shelved until a year later. This next riff was written by one of the most influential rock bands of all time. The song was written about the relentless touring the band did for the next few album tours. And that's my 20 riffs. Wait, oh no, I forgot Van Halen. This song comes off an album that came out in 1978 that changed guitar forever. Wait, why are you still here? You want me to play it, don't you?